Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Coach's Corner. Today's topic, we're going to be going over character communities and how technical characters usually isn't just pushed by one player, even though it might look like that on the surface. But before we get into that, I just got to go over a few things first.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and scan the QR code on the bottom right, or you can join the Stride Discord by using the link bit.ly/Coaches Corner QA. Once you do that, you can go ahead and check out the channels and roles section on the left, and then hit browse channels on the top to find the podcast Q&A category to ask your questions to either Coach's Corner, Tweak Talks, or Lights Out. So go ahead and get all your questions answered here with Stride.
Watch the Throne. We have all these amazing players. Make sure to come through December 8th through 10th. You can check out the Start GG on startgg/watch the throne. Make sure to check out all the new updates on Twitter at WTT events. We have amazing players like Leo, Tweak, Spargo, Light, Proto, Akola, Gluto, Bloom, and more. And we even had Mia and the Buzz qualify through SmashCon. The next qualifier will be port priority, so really excited to get into that. And now, let's talk about the topic here. So, I know with different character communities, we're all very old school. So I used to be a huge part of the Smash 4 Fox community. I used to have all the charts. I used to be a lab rat. I used to have all these different like numbers, like when X goes in a tumble with X amount of rage, that's when you can start forward tilt tech chasing, and then even just like Fox was very technical in Smash 4. I don't think Fox is that technical in Ultimate, but he was just super technical. So I've been a part of these really huge like lab rat communities that also had the connection to top players, right? And I think not every character community has that. And then there's obviously just character communities that just off of sheer popularity, they're gonna get their character pushed like Steve, right? Steve is just so popular and so technical that all the technical stuff, you don't really even need to go into a character Discord. You'll probably just see it on your timeline on Twitter, right? So as we go forward in the Smash community, and you guys are probably in part of like character communities for Brawl as well. I was a little bit more disconnected because I was in Hawaii, but I kept up with as much as I did in Smashboards and all that jazz. So all these different character communities, it's so much easier for them to connect nowadays, right? Where there's like character Discords, Twitter, like information spreads like wildfire. So Bam, what are your thoughts on, I mean, just like surface level and even some of your past experiences with some of these more close-knit character communities that can push characters to their limits because they have connections with top-level players, or the top-level players are down to listen to some of these lab rats even though they get better results, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting, right? We all know about the old adage, right? That it takes a village, right? And that is something that is you could see from like any sorts of discipline, and I think that's always been a fascinating thing to see in Smash, right? Smash obviously it's extremely popular, and it's popular because of these great IPs, and with these IPs becomes a fandom, right? And you're gonna have a ton of people who are interested in degrees, and then you have the people who are just kind of homies, and then over time they just like notice someone's kind of the better player, so to speak, and then it's like, all right, well, let's rally behind our homie, man. Let's see how far they can go. Personally, coming from the brawl side, I was part of the Smash Labs back in the day, and it kind of helping with different like how people can learn some like frame traps and like option selects, which was hilarious to teach back in the day because no one knew what an option select is. I feel like still to this day, people don't really know what OSs are, but they're getting better at it, right? In the Smash side of things. But yeah, man, like I started off originally as a Snake main, right? And worked alongside with like back in the day who like he made the down throw like the chart like for like the roles and different things, and that's actually the first thing I worked on before I even actually came like officially into the Smash scene. So like working on that, and that was something that was used throughout the course of Brawl, that knowledge, and then I ended up being a Sonic main, and you know teaching a whole different players. You had a lot of different labbers in there, right? You had like Kid, you had like Bamam, you had like, and then you had players who were like just soaking the stuff and just like just thriving, right? Shouts to SB, right? You have like Meek Speedy, like all this, or just like a ton of people, right, who end up pushing the character in different ways. And even over time too, Sonic in particular, obviously being a very popular character and having a huge like diehard fandom, like they do not care. You can give us 20 bad games, we still are playing Sonic, right? That's just the mentality of it, and they're all just happy go lucky, just happy to be here type thing. And even between games, right? Something that this like for me was interesting to see because so people were so intent with optimizing this character that even people saw my playstyle back in Brawl, right? I remember 6WX talking to me one time when we had to play at Apex and told me that I helped inspire some of his playstyle. And 6WX obviously being, becoming like the Sonic, right? Out in Smash 4. And then also he has been someone who has been influential even in Sonic's playstyle, right? So like it's a really cool thing to see when people are able like to come together and these top players are taking notice and also inquiring from people who, yeah, maybe they for whatever reason, right? Because everyone has their own different skill sets, and maybe there are skill sets at the time where they're at, or they're not putting enough practice or life, whatever it may be, takes away from them performing well, right, as a player. But still understanding the value of people and working with people and just wanting to bring this character to the next level. It's really great to see top players who do see that and they're like, hey, and they work in tandem with these people and they become better for it, right? They become optimized. We saw just recently from like Terra, right? Tweak playing extremely well, just falling short to Gluto. But like the one of the cool things is just seeing like him kind of talk about the Diddy Kong mains and how they were able to kind of help him and in terms of his journey to optimization for that character. And obviously, when we look at his Diddy in comparison to so many others, it's like it seems like it's just night and day, right? But it's like still all these people coming together and helping, like, hey, you can actually do this is a little bit better, right? And this will kill earlier, right? This is how you can get it confirmed from this situation, this scenario, and there's only so much you can do as a person, right? And this is true for everything in life. One of the big things that even I've heard, even at my time at Red Bull, right, was from some of these like Olympians, right? These Olympians, these players, and I know I've said this before during Coach's Corner, but I'll say it again. It's one of the big things they were saying, like, hey, you know what? There's only a certain amount of a level that you can get to as an individual. At some point in time, you need a team around you to get to the next step, right? Otherwise, you cannot be more than just who you are. And hearing that from world champions, right, is something that validates that. But that's something I think intrinsically a lot of us know, right? That's why we're social, right? That's why we connect to people. That's why we're supposed to share ideas, right? Communicate with each other. But that doesn't always happen in different scenes, So it's but I always think it's a beautiful thing when it does, because that's the only way you're going to get a character even close to being at its peak.
For sure. I think a big thing in the culture of like, sharing ideas has been character discords, for better or for worse. I think there is a bit of a stigma, right? I think we can agree that like, character discords there is this thing in the Smash scene where everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be knowledgeable. Everyone wants to, give advice. And that's totally fine. It's a very noble thing to want to do. But it's also led to a lot of like higher level players, right? Kind of ignoring character discords and kind of like sticking to their peers, which if you play one of the more technical or unique character, you often don't have a lot of, right? So like you said, if you play Steve, you're gonna have, like a handful, like 10 Steve players that you can share ideas with. If you play, I don't know, Peach, you're not gonna find a lot of top level Peaches that you can share ideas with. If you include language barrier between Japan and like, English speaking countries, or let's say Western countries as well. And I think that is a huge barrier that we're dealing with right now. I think there are often attempts to make more limited communication groups, but they always get bloated to some degree. And of course, there's also the fact that like a lot of these people live in different metas, which means that sometimes you're just dealing with very different problems, right? So the biggest issue that we're running into is just like the media, the circumstance of information transferring. And that's why, especially when we look at characters that are combo oriented or that are technical, you can listen to these like lower level players in terms of results and still get a lot out of it. you think about, like a character like Peach, we look at Mutes implementing like the turnip trains. That's because we had him on the podcast because of Yasugin. I'm sorry if I butchered the name. I think it's Yasugin. Who's a Peach player that does all that stuff in actual matches, right? And he doesn't get the results that Umeki does, or Key, but he's still inspiring the best Peach player in the world at the moment, Mutes. And so what we see is that there's a lot of development for these more technical characters, especially recently as people have gotten more into like the late meta in terms of like the tech and the interactions and the optimizations. And I think at the same time, the thing that we need the most is sharing strategy, sharing ideas, sharing play styles. And I think that is where there's still the most to be gained. Talking from like my personal perspective, I play Shulk, right? I still compete. I am one of the better Shulks in the world, at least in Europe. And it's very hard because so what I noticed in the Shulk community is that there's always like a few people that kind of carry the technical side, right? Like people that are willing to lab it out, that are willing to sit down and really get into the nitty gritty of a situation, of a tech, and just like play with ideas. And so if these players quit, if they don't get hurt, then oftentimes the technical aspects kind of like falls away. And that's something that has happened to the show community. So we had Gaku, shout out to Gaku, amazing labber, who used to lab a lot of Shulk stuff. He did that for like a year straight. No one listened, and he just like stopped. I came along and I engaged with all that stuff, and then like we kind of got our research in tech, and people are learning dial storage, and it's becoming more of a thing, right? But it often gets carried by a single person. If we think about like the turnip trains, again, it's Yasu who's really pushing that stuff. So what you find is like Bam said, it's often like it takes a village. But it's also about like the individual residents of the village. And what I find is that it's very hard to create an environment in which everyone comes to their own properly, right? Like the labbers are effective and are heard, but they don't like overstep, because like let's be fair, if you get someone who is into all the tech stuff but they don't get any results and they start giving advice to players in terms of strategy, like a lot of people understandably will be turned off by that. So there's a lot of like social dynamics in the whole concept of like it takes a village and what can you offer. And that's why, for example, I love when Mr. R. So Mr. R has notoriously struggled with Palutena, especially our flow. But he won their last set, and he posted on Twitter, well, thank you for the advice to, I think it was WebJP and another Sheik. I'm sorry if I forgot the name, but I'm like, that's the cool shit, right? Like when you are at a place where you can communicate effectively on like a strategical level if that's relevant, on an interaction level if that's relevant, a matchup level if that is relevant, and it's not like overstepping, and it's not wasteful, because I think most of the time when it gets bloated, like I said, that's where a lot of the communication breaks down. That's also, if we take a step back to like Smash 4, I think the biggest example of a character thriving because of a group of people coming together is Bayo, right? I think we can agree on that. They were extremely advanced, extremely rapidly in their meta. And I think it's because you had a bunch of people who are friends and they were all high level. So the information shared was relevant, etc., etc. So I think what I would love to see is for people who play like more complex characters to set up like a structured discords, be picky about who you let in, and have your information documented properly as well, because I think there's a lot of very useful information, again speaking from personal experience, that has been labbed out, that has been discovered, that we just don't use because it's kind of forgotten, right? Because like, oh, Shulk Tech is useless, let's not use Shulk Tech because it sucked in Smash 4. Okay, so we forget the Shulk Tech for the first year, and then we're like, we're 4 years in, and suddenly it becomes relevant to push the character, and no one knows what it is anymore because it's just been forgotten. And I think, again, that's, if we go back to Smashboards, it's been such a good place for that to happen because of how threats are archived, because of a small back room, right? You guys remember character back rooms? It was like the Falco back room. If you got into that, you were someone, right? That's like 20 people max. So stuff like that,
That was
I
like
think
the
culturally,
Falco Discord, right? Or at least like
exactly,
that is
like the
like the
top
Yeah,
level
the
best.
Discord.
VIP, man.
Yeah, the VIP Falco
Yeah.
Discord, if you will.
Exactly. So you had like the Falco boards, that's the Falco character Discord. And then you have the Falco backroom, and that's like the invite only if you're like, top of your region kind of stuff. So we
Yeah.
had like, Larry, SK92, that type of stuff,
Mm.
K-Taro. But yeah, I think like the biggest obstacle that we're facing in Smash is mostly just in like the communication style.
Yeah, no,
So
for sure, man. Go ahead.
uh,
Sorry.
I also come from the Smash Lab, like ma'am. And so for me, my origin story was in investigating shield drops because I thought shield drops are the future of Smash. And then, sure enough, like 15 years into Melee, it became the de facto meta thing to do. But the idea is that when I view the idea of character communities and their role toward top players, essentially it comes down to who you can learn from. And so I believe the expression is everyone has their ace. And so the question there is, how are you finding your aces? And are you receptive to learning from everyone just because they aren't necessarily known for it? So one of the things that come from those kinds of exclusivity, or I'm not sure what the phrase for that is, but essentially barring off the community so that only so many players are there. The issue is that generally, while there are more players who are going to be in there who are going to have something valuable to say and fewer people who are just full of air, you're also still going to end up closing out some of the gems along with the chafe. And so when we're looking at what you're going to get, the idea is essentially you ask yourself, well, what resource is there? And then how am I filtering it so that I'm only getting the good things? And so I think that what that ultimately comes down to is actually the top players themselves have the discernment to identify information while asking for it from as many people as possible. For example, I believe we discussed in the gluttony episode that he specifically talks to everyone, asks advice from everyone, gets notes from as many people as he can, and then he just kind of looks at, tries it out, sees what works, what doesn't. But he doesn't just tell people, "Oh, listen, you're not a top warrior, you don't know anything." So, it like that kind of filtration system is what I think really separates those who are able to push past that and get
Mhm.
more from the less known members of the community. I think that it's also more predictive of someone's potential based on where they start out on that spectrum. So I think that the idea for most people is that you start out at such a point and then you get progressively better from there. I think for a lot of labbing players, they don't necessarily start off strong because a very common misconception that labbers have is that they have a very rigid view of the game. And anytime that their immediate system of viewing the game is incorrect, they can't adapt. And so eventually, what you have is a breaking point where they'll just realize that how they view the game is not actually how the game is. And so at that point, they either quit or they decide to essentially relearn the game from a different pragmatic level. And I think that that's where we both get a lot of the labbing community. And I think that's also where we get our top players from the labbing community when those are there. So I think that when we are looking at things like character discords, one of the issues is what determines someone's social worth within those discords. So, uh, part of the reason it was so valuable to people to get into these back rooms back in the Brawl community was that essentially, as I forget who said, it meant that you were somebody, that other people were going to listen to you when you spoke because you had a different color on your name. And so it was
Right.
important for social reasons to get into these, and you had to generally display something of worth in order to get into them. Whereas this character discords generally just let you in, and then if you're in, you're in. And so I think it depends on what the actual culture of the Discord is. And so the problem with character discords is that there is no defined culture, and so each one has its own culture based on who's managing it. And So then you ultimately are just rolling sociological dice every single time you set up a character Discord to decide how effective it's going to be. I know Bam mentioned Sonic. Like just the other day, I saw Sonic's Twitch stream where he was labbing and practicing, and like half of the top Sonics were in the Twitch chat discussing ideas and also
Mhm.
asking him questions. So it was basically just a way of having like a top player meetup right then and there. No character Discord, no lasting text. But outside of what people took away in their mind, though, all that information is lost. It's not like I can just tell some new player who's picking up Sonic, oh yeah, just go check 3 months old VOD from Sonic's Twitch stream. Like that's just not a way of archiving information, and I think that's also an issue going forward with character Discords. Is that longer term, we are losing recipes. We are going to eventually lose out on this information unless it's being separately archived. And if we do have it, it's because of the separate archive. It's not because of Discord. And so Discord is, I think, kind of a transitional phase for the community right now. And I'm more interested in where the community should go from Discord. So,
Yeah.
Charles, what do you think are some good solutions to that?
I mean, like there's a bunch of different ways. The way I view it, and I mean, it's kind of like just stacking on to the problem, right? Where it's just like before the information didn't spread as fast, but now our information spreads extremely fast, but it's more on like temporary. It's kind of just like it gets gassed out. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like a wildfire, just like spreads really quick and then poof, it's gone. So the spread is really quick, but the stick isn't really there, right? Because and the spread is really fast because of things like Twitter, like Discord, right? But none of it's really getting archived. And unless we all came together and be like, all right, this is the official Fox Discord, this is the official Shulk Discord, this is the official Diddy Discord, then it kind of gets lost and not archived. Um, Unlike the forum aspect, where it was community leaders that had control over the website, essentially being the forum, and it was like, all right, this is important, this is trash, this gets pinned, all right, so boom, you go into the Falco Discord, bang, I'm learning Falco, or like Falco Tech, there's like a Falco Tech like section, right? You go into the Falco Tech section, then there's things that are pinned, all right, boom, pin the top pin one, all relevant Falco Tech, and that thing can get edited. Oh, something relevant got added from important to least important. Boom, 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 boom. Everything's archived. Everything's organized. I don't know if it's even possible to go back to something like a forum or something like that. That's pretty difficult to make, pretty difficult to manage. I mean, obviously it's possible, but I think it'd be hard to rally everyone to get behind it, right? I think that's the hard part, is getting everyone united to be like, all right, guys, fuck all these character Discords. We're gonna go to this website or this forum, and now this is what we use. I almost feel like it would
It's
have
not
to.
happening.
Yeah, you could do like some character Discord or something like that, or no, you do a Smash Ultimate Discord, like a Smash Ultimate Tech, and if someone like was able to run that, but then you would have to get like a bunch of top players to rally behind that. Maybe we could do something like that because we have a lot of connections to top players. But that's a project that, it takes a lot of time and dedication, and you don't get any money for it. Whoa. So that's the kind of real issue, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like since the reward's not there, it's
Yeah.
so hard. And like a lot of us that are really experienced and could run this kind of stuff, we have the connections to the
It's
top
time.
players. We're older. Like I don't have time to just like do all of this shit for free,
And
right?
you get very little out of it, right? Like if you're like light and you're like you're deciding what information for Fox is important or not, like that is a lot
Light
of
ain't gonna do
effort.
that.
And yeah, I mean, but okay,
But yeah, I see
not
what you're
light,
saying.
but like a best player of the character, right? Like you have the best idea of what is relevant or not, and then like you spend all that effort, and like you maybe learn something new, and if you do, it's probably very niche. Is that worth all that time and effort for you? Whereas like what you often see that the people who do set up these types of projects, because they're usually like more mid-level, they get more out of it, but they also are less accurate in terms of like deciding what is relevant and what is going to be impactful for the character. So like you said,
Yeah.
Charles, agree on 100%. Like the reward is just like it's very hard. it's very hard to set it up in a way that's rewarding for uh like players of all skill levels.
Yeah, and I mean,
The
I think,
Reddit
But I mean, this
moderator
is
problem.
The
yeah,
Reddit
yeah,
moderator
in
problem.
general, yeah, definitely have a moderator problem. But like the thing that's interesting because this has actually been an ongoing issue that people have been trying to figure out just in general in the tech space, right? Like you have this idea, like you guys were talking about, where information now has become like ephemeral and just transient, right? You just see stuff go and then it's blinking an eye, right? And a lot of that actually is intentional, right? But like that in terms of these ideas where you're just having information come up, like how many times are people rediscovering the same thing
Yep.
over and over, right? If we want to zoom back a bit, how many times have you seen this same clip that everyone just found on Twitter, right? This same combo. How many times can people do the same thing and it just cycles back and forth, right? And puts people into a loop. And yeah, it detracts people from kind of seeing like what actually has taken place, what strides that have people actually made and being able to actually actually go through and like break it down based on the information that's been archived, right? So I know Discord itself too has been trying to work on different things, right? Obviously, pinning things, some, even competitors and stuff as well, looking at things like having some kind of forums, like it's something that's a combination of a forum and a Discord, like having that kind of inside as well. I think Discord, I don't know if they still have it or, I mean, if they do, I feel like no one's really using it, but I know even Discord was trying to pilot some kind of forum aspect as well, right? So there are strides to find something of that nature, but
There's
it's just very hard.
the Smash Wiki project as well, which I really, really
Yeah.
enjoy. I think that's
Yep.
really cool. It's kind of like Dust Loop, but for Smash. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's all community contributed, right? And like, just like I said earlier, like I look at the Shulk stuff, it's informative, but I think if you're a good Shulk player, you're not going to get much out of it, right? And
Right.
again, like that's where you go back to like how do you structure that? How do you structure it in a way that's informative for low, mid, and high and top level players? And yeah, again, like the top level players have the most info, but also the least to gain in terms of sharing it. Which is a shame because I think they should, right? Like, and I think a lot of them do, but not in a time consuming way. And at the end of the
Right.
day, I
And
think
it's
there's
what their focus
that
is too, right?
exactly, and I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is like there's the goodwill, but is there the vehicle to express that?
well, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead, Tony.
because
I was going to say,
go ahead,
to be
Tony.
fair, I think the wiki perfectly exemplifies what is more valuable about like the lab and community and such over top players. Because if you ask any of the top 10, possibly top 20, maybe even top 50 players who play the game, what the shield stun formula is for Ultimate, they're not going to be able to tell you. Like, there's just so many questions where if you ask someone who's not necessarily effective at getting event results, then they might have other information and be very educated and qualified to deliver that information, but not be getting those kinds of results. And I think it just goes down to show what kind of information is valuable and where you want to get it from. And so that kind of delineation, I think, is important.
Yeah.
No, 1,000%. And it's like, you're gonna have kind of like a tiered system, right, in these kind of communities. But like I know Tony, you were talking a lot about this, but like in order for this ecosystem to thrive, someone, it has to feel beneficial to everyone in some sort of capacity, right? You're going to have aspects of people feeling like they're acknowledged, right? Like their work is not going unfounded, that they're being heard, right? From the top player, they want to get, for them, it becomes no longer a game of miles, but the inches, right? How can I optimize this little bit of thing? This is going to make the difference for my play, that I can, the next step. But they also have to see it in that lens too, because some top players just simply don't see it that way, right? And even maybe there's tech that can be found. They're like, oh well, I'm just gonna get better at reading my opponent, right? I'm gonna get better at like figuring out how to go against this player versus let me find this thing that now allows me to kill say like 5% earlier, whatever mean, right? Or like kind of something that can just better my overall chances, cover more options when they're at the ledge, etc. So it takes a certain mindset for that, right? And I don't think it's a surprise that you have people like Tweak, like a Gluto, right? I think Gluto especially, right? Coming from his general background, right? it's no surprise that he's someone that is taking in all this information from everyone, filtering it out, right? And then, having that discernment, right? And testing it out himself. Man is a scientist. He's going to use the scientific method, right? Like that's how he's going to go about things. And I love that, right? In his kind of mindset. And you see that from a lot of people now that it's right. Like I love that you're seeing more of these people thrive in that capacity. Sonics, obviously, we talked about a little bit already, but same kind of thing where this guy is sitting down and he's labbing and he's studying and practicing as well. He's incorporated that. It's not just in this time right now, there's so many like information, even though we talk about how it gets lost at times, there's still the sheer volume of information and like that for players right now is insane compared to where back in the day, right? Back in the day, if you were lucky, right, if you were just jamming it, you got to be in the Meta Knight back room and you got a little note by M2K to tell you how to down smash better. Like that's what it was, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was, but nowadays, right, I can go and find out, advanced tech on YouTube or, watch whatever, or even, watch Ramses coaching videos, right? And all these kind of things, right? There, like you have, that's the level of accessibility that people have now that people just didn't have before. So because of that, like that scale, right? Everything's just like higher. So I think like all this to say that people need to find value in those game of inches as a top player. People need to find value in being part of a community and being a contributing member, right? Whether it's you are the greatest labber, some people they're just great for the community because they just bring people together, right? And that's another avenue, right? And that again, this is something that we're talking about Smash, but when we're talking about community, this is something that can be applied all over, right? Some people are going to be the ones who are like, hey, I know this guy. I'm the connector. I know this person bringing in. Hey, I'm going to set it up so we all are talking, or I'm doing doing fun giveaways or whatever it may be. And those things may seem kind of minuscule, but that's the thing that keeps everyone together, right? And that's part of what makes the library feel heard, or that's part of the hey, these guys are kind of cool, that makes the top player actually feel more invested in all these other players despite their skill level, right? Because unfortunately you do have a situation where some people are like, oh, you're not good enough, why am I even bothering wasting my time with you? Let me go play with top 50 over here instead, or top 20 over here, and then call it a day, right? But more people are seeing value in people beyond that. And I think that's really cool, and it's absolutely essential for people growing, right? We all have our certain places, right? We all, and also we can just incorporate different things, right? I can incorporate little things on how I lab and how I break things down as a top player from these labbers, and now I become better, right? One of the groups that I always used to love back in the day, Melee Marth. Melee Marth Smash boards, that's a classic, right? These guys, you're talking about like PPMD, Cactar, all these people, and it's funny because I feel that a lot of a lot of discords, a lot of character boards over time that ended up like thriving for different games kind of modeled themselves after kind of stuff that they had seen in the Melee Marth like boards, right? And you just had a collective of people. You had a top player like PPMD really eager to discuss and break things down with people. And you had all sorts of people who had their varying degrees of expertise and trying to break down, finding that sense of perfection, right? Not just, oh, you are best player at the end, right? They all had in their head a concept of like the perfect Marth gameplay or the perfect like play. How do we reach that? Everyone had an input there. And I think in that sense, no matter how close, quote unquote, closer someone is there, like everyone can be a willing participant when it's like there's this like kind of metaphysical goal that we're all kind of reaching together, right? And it takes us again as a team, as a village, to reach that goal. And no one truly ever reaches it, but we get closer, we get closer, we get closer, right? So I always thought that was extremely fascinating, and I hope to see that more now, even though it's definitely in this day and age, people have become more polarizing. People have become more separate. And which is a little unfortunate, despite all this information. Like we're in this very weird age where we have all the information in the world and none of it at the same time. And
There's so
how
much
how do we
noise.
find a way? Yeah,
There's
there's a
so much
whole lot of
noise.
noise, right? And unfortunately, you can have information in plain sight and yet not see it because
Mhm.
of the nature of the world we live in. And again, that's intentional by a lot of the social media and things that we use nowadays as well, right? So how do we circumnavigate that? Or circumvent that as people, right? To build a better ecosystem, not just to optimizing the character and whatever, but also to enjoy and have a good time. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us get invested in this. When we talked about going back to what Charles was saying in terms of retention, that comes from enjoying ourselves, right? Having that camaraderie there. That goes a long way to how people actually get into the Smash community, the fighting game community, right? That's why we have people who are passionate. They can go and leave the scene and do whatever, and people seem to always come back, or at least are still watching, right? At least spectating, at least supporting. I also think that's part of the reason. To kind of even dive to the industry just really quick. I think that's also a reason why we're a lot more sustainable, right? Because people are in that kind of avenues as well, kind of the level of that kind of ecosystem, right? You see in other esports, there's a huge disparity between, the top, obviously, and then like everyone else. So, it's something that we can't take for granted. We need to continue to build up, and so we can continue to flourish.
So, something I think other esports do fairly well is that they actually implement support for supporting members of the community, like coaches, to put it in a self-serving manner. Like it's very much more common than the FGC in general and Smash in particular to have like sponsorship support for coaching for coaches, that
Mhm.
partially because of our rule set as well. Like for those who have not been in the community for more than a decade, it actually used to be legal to have coaching mid match. So you could be playing your tournament set and just have someone sitting in a chair next to you saying like, "Yeah, he's definitely going to roll next time." And so, like, as our rule set has changed, partially because it's, well, frankly, not fair to especially like newer or unestablished players to have that kind of infrastructure available and then not give it to them. Uh, that's also part of what makes it incentivized on a more organizational basis. Like for orgs that are hiring people, that these are the kinds of things they need. So my question there is, how could we incentivize that kind of structure toward other supporting members? So I know like Lumi Rank is an example of that, and that they are essentially supporting the people who run the rankings and then trying to follow up off of that. So how could we implement that into other roles in the community?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's hard because there's not a lot of teams just investing into Smash at the moment. Smash doesn't have the greatest value after we lost both of our global circuits. I mean, like obviously that's a lot more like of a political talk in itself, but at the end of the day, we had two global circuits. The value of Smash Brothers esports was going up, and then it came crashing down. On top of that, just the base economy going down, and then on top of that, the esports economy because of the global economy going down. So everything's kind of like stacking up against that. There was a time where I used to be a coach on TSM, and I used to coach Void as well, and like 4COG and stuff like that. So it's like all that kind of stuff. I feel like that era is not gonna come back until we get a new fighter pass, a deluxe game, a new game. That is when I will see the return of that kind of stuff. Maybe, and then with the circuits going down, like the circuits had the potential to have an analyst desk and stuff like that to get more people involved into like the deeper side of Smash and all that other stuff. But without that organized circuit, no tournament is gonna do like a analyst desk, right? I mean, the closest thing that I've done to an analyst desk recently was last weekend at Nintendo Live when I'm
That's
literally
right, man. Talk
commentating
to him, man.
to
Let him
children
know.
and parents, and like but that like I'm being analytical, but I'm doing it at the most base level, right? So
not the ideal. Like in terms of like an analyst desk at a 1v1 tournament with no items with like our rule set, like that has not happened in a very, very long time. Probably like 2GGC or something like that. The 2G championship was probably the last time that we had like a full blown analyst desk. And that was in Smash 4. If for people that weren't in Smash 4, it was like the circuit, the one circuit. Yeah, the one circuit that happened in Smash 4 from 2GG, which is an org that doesn't run tournaments anymore. So yeah, it's tough, and we need the value of Smash to go up, because if the value of Smash isn't up, what's the baseline I need to cut costs if I'm a org? I just get the player. That's it, right? Get the player, or for Luminosity, getting the rankings, because we know how impactful the rankings are and how important they are because of Panda, right? Panda Global had their rankings, and that was like the thing. And I mean, you could kind of like it could be a thing where you make money off of it. So unless the player is making so much money for the org, it doesn't make sense to get supporting things for the player, right? Where you're spending more money for the player. So I mean, that's just the sad reality of it. But I do think that when the value of Smash goes up, maybe another circuit comes around, maybe another game comes around. That's the big thing. And another thing I wanted to go over in this episode is like the connection between player, labber, coach. Like these are all different entities, and you can kind of mix. So I feel like all of us have at least fit into one of those spots during our time, and even like during our time as competitors, some of us were labbers that competed, right, and stuff like that. And one thing that you have, the main thing is the connection to the top rep, right? And I don't even know. To my knowledge, Light or MKLeo, these are players that don't really talk to the lab rats of the characters, right? Shout outs to Crest Scholars. They're actually a big part of the content team here at Smash University. And to my knowledge, they don't really connect with MKLeo, and they know a ton of incredible buy list stuff, right? And there's like a couple of reasons for that, right? First, like Bam mentioned, you have the player has to want to be technical, and you don't have to be technical to win in Smash Brothers. That is just a fact. So the pool, like your demographic for the people who want this information are very, very slim. So not only do they have to be like a high or top level player, but they have to be a top or high level player that wants to play technical, right? So that's already one thing. And then on top of that, how many high and top level players are there out in the world? There's not a lot, right? So that's another thing to take into consideration, which is why this information gets lost so fast, because the pool of people that actually can and want to use it are very, very small. And even for me, archiving information, I feel like YouTube is the best thing. And that's why we made Smash University, right? Like this is a YouTube channel that you can go to, and you could like search the whole YouTube channel for Shulk or neutral or a general aspect of the game, right? Or we don't have any Shulk videos, but like you could search a specific character.
Ramses is like, wait, what?
Hit me up.
But yeah, like we used to when we used to have more resources to like do a ton of guides and stuff. Like we made a Sephiroth guide, we made Pyramithra guide, but those were also more incentivized by us because those characters just got released. So the pool of the demographic of people who wanted to figure out how to play against or play the character is much larger, right? So, and even when you look at Smash University in general, most of the content is geared towards newer to mid-level players because that demographic is bigger. So again, if I made a video that was like super specific on Smash University about Diddy Tech in this specific matchup that Tweak would love to watch, it's not gonna have a lot of views because that's just the reality of it, right? So because of that, that's why all of this information gets lost so much, because when YouTube incentivizes you to get as much views as possible. So putting up these videos with low demographic, you're not going to get much reward for all the editing and writing the script and doing all this other stuff. So for the most part, the best avenue of getting this information to the player is if the labber is directly connected to the player. Oh, hey, I found this shit. It could be really good in this matchup, in this matchup, in this matchup. Okay, cool. Noted. Boom. Done. Right? So because there's just not that incentive to put that information publicly because the demographic's so low. And for this connection between the player and the coach, or the player and the labber, to happen, it's like it's like Tony said, it's like RNG. It's like social RNG. Like, did you run into this player? Like, did Tweak like see a Diddy clip of you and was like, oh my god, that's like super useful. Let me hit this person up, right? You know what I mean? And like that's the kind of that is the reason why Tweak knows a lot of the top Diddy labbers, and he gets connected with them because he really, that is how he wants to play the game. That is his vision of Smash. He wants to have an extremely large toolbox, and even though it's mentally hard to keep track of all these different tools, and he has to sit down in training mode and train on execution for hours and hours just for movement, he's not even like doing Kazuya combos and being like, oh yeah, I'm doing this training so when I hit someone, I zero to death them. Ha ha ha. It's like, no, he's doing all this training and his hands are hurting and all this other stuff just so he can have a slight little advantage in neutral with his movement to possibly get an opening, which then he has to execute the combo that he has to also practice later on, right? So not a lot of players are like that. And even I brought up like MK Leo earlier. Like, he's a player that is just always plays the player and does like the baseline technical stuff. But are you going to see him do like the super technical Byleth stuff that Crest Scholars puts out on their YouTube channel? Probably not, right? And that's just a player style thing. And even for players like Light, I don't think Light does the most technical stuff. But now in this meta, I feel like players are getting pushed to it. Like, oh, you're not doing that kind of technical stuff. Ooh, you might kind of be falling behind. Yeah, like we're getting really deep into the meta, and even things like I know that me and Void talk a lot about Fox because Void is just another player that's very technical. He was a lab rat top player, right? There's not a lot of lab rat top players, so Void is a very special case where he was a lab rat top player. Esam, lab rat top player, right? So it happens, but not often, right? And Light will talk to me and Void about Fox stuff, and and me and Void will just talk by ourselves about Fox, and then kind of transfer that information on the Light. And usually when we tell Light a lot of stuff, he's pretty stubborn about it. Like, he just kind of doesn't want to do it, or he's just like, oh, well, I'd rather like do X, Y, and Z. And then 2 or 3 months later, that's when I start seeing that shit come out. I'm like, all right, so you were listening. And now it's like, and it also just takes time, right? It also takes time to implement these things. Like Sour Dash Attack at Ledge of the Forward Smash. That it was something that me and Void were talking about, 6 months ago, maybe even longer. You know what I mean? And then
you jammed me with that.
Yeah,
and
I mean, now we're seeing Light do it in tournament and like robbing people at like 80% with a character like Fox who does 80 damage off one combo or one interaction. You can imagine how broken that is. And then even when I was making the Metafy guide, the Fox Metafy guide with Light, something I wanted to put in the guide was, and I knew this, like, maybe it's just my experience as a coach, but I knew the next like layer to the meta, right? So I was like, okay, right now everyone's just getting grabbed, right? And like we made this Metafy like guide maybe, or we started it like 6-8 months ago, maybe even longer. No, yeah, longer, like a year ago. So I was like, yeah, I mean, right now everyone's like taking grabs and yada, yada, yada. But once they figure out that you're putting them on platforms and you're getting a bajillion damage off tech chasing them on the platform and stuff like that, people are naturally going to want to roll or jump, right? So one thing that I wanted to put in the Metafy guide was like running up to people and doing rising up air after conditioning, like after getting X amount of grabs, right? Because the main combo starter you want with Fox is up air. And if you clip someone at mid% with just a rising up air and they jump, they are going to get blown the fuck back. And if you watch Shine, guess how Light got a lot of damage and a lot of kills? He ran up to Zamba and he did up air. And you know what he told me a year ago? He was like, Charles, it's bad. Come on. I don't know why you would even talk about that. I don't want to put it in the guide. I was like, all right. And like, as the labber or coach, there's a lot of times where you just have to respect how the top player is thinking at the moment. And even though I knew Light was eventually going to use it, I'm not going to tell him that because I don't want to like have an ego battle with him. It's not about that, right? All I want Fox to be played at the highest level. I want to see this game pushed as far as possible because I love this game and I love watching this game. And the higher level the game is played at, the more entertaining it is for myself and everyone else watching. So that's what I want. And if I like have to swallow my ego to like keep a good relationship with this player for him to respect my opinion, I'll do that. That's fine, right? And it's not about like I'm right and he's wrong, or he's right and I'm wrong. It's not about that. It's more just mutual respect on, hey, like we don't, because there is no right and wrong. It's a ton of gray area. It's risk reward and stuff like that. But the main thing is there has to be a level of respect from the top player to the labber, and the labber has to have that same respect to the top player, right? And that's the main thing. And that the same way goes for coaching, because coaching is very similar to like the labber, not necessarily. It's like it's similar in terms of it needs to be a two-way street of respect, but the coach usually goes over strategies, right? Whereas the labber is giving the player tools. Oh, here's a tool. Like this interaction goes like this if you do this. Oh, this, you can get more damage if you do X, Y, or Z. It's this hard to do. Is it worth doing, right? And usually when a coach talks to a player about the tools of the game, that's where it's like, is this worth doing? Is this worth your time labbing? Should you just practice, right? That's where the coach can help out a lot, because they usually have past experience as a competitor, or they are just specialized in studying the game and seeing if it's worth doing X, Y, or Z, right? So I just wanted to go over that, the relationship between the labber, between the coach, between the player, because it's a triangle, and you need all three, right? And actually, I won't even say you need. You definitely don't need all three, but it helps a lot, and it just takes the right type of player to desire all three. Because most players are down. I would say almost all top players are down for coaching, almost, but not like most top players aren't down to talk with lab rats. I would say the majority of top players right now are more so just like, I'm trying to learn fundamental wise and yada yada yada, right? Because those tools, to get access to those lab tools, it takes a bunch of extra work. And some people,
I think
it's not even a lazy thing. Some people just don't have time to do that, right?
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to noise, right? A lot of top players, they get a lot of noise thrown at them, whether it's like people trying to give them advice on coaching wise or tech wise. And your first reaction just starts to become no thanks, right? So a lot of the time, it's and it sounds weird, but it's up to like the person offering advice or offering a tool to prove that it is worth something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got
It
to
can
be able
hard
to
for
talk to people appropriately, because
Exactly.
it makes perfect sense. It makes absolute sense, because you have so many people coming up to you with so many different motives, right? And so much
Yep.
different information. And like we said, there's a whole lot of information out there nowadays, and there's less filters, right? And so that's that's the big problem. So
Yeah.
you got a lot of times where it's just like pure nonsense. So it completely it's understandable why top player is going to default to that, right? And it's only until the point where it's like, okay, someone is actually generally trying to talk to me, right? They have, good intentions. They're not here just because they're trying to get close to me for some, just being stupid,
Social
right? Just do
cloud
some
kind
nonsense.
of.
Yeah, social
Yeah.
clout, blah blah blah. Because there's a whole spectrum of things as to why people do these things, right? So takes time to discover that intention, and a lot of times it's like, I'm good. Like,
Yep.
why
Yep.
go through all that? But there's definitely worthy reasons for that. But I think that's another reason why, for people who are, other aspects of the scene, right, whatever it may be, and this goes into commentary and this and that, whatever, like, be genuine, man. Just be a freaking human, be clear with your intentions, and you'll find people who share those same values, and if they care about it and they're down, cool. You build a relationship, you guys can pursue some, higher goal together. But yeah, if you're gonna be disingenuous and it's like you're chasing this clout and then being weird to other people as well, people see that, man. People just don't want to interact with that, right? At the end of the day, you want to be around, decent human beings, trying to
No
pursue like
ulterior
some kind of common
motives.
good. Yeah, right. None of that nonsense. And I've had some talks to some people, both on the labber side, the player side, and on the commentary side, especially recently, where it's like, dude, just be a real human, man. Like, stop this nonsense, because people see it. They really do. But yeah, any last thoughts for everyone? Close it up.
I specifically wanted to say I think that part of the relationship comes down to the efficacy of characters as well. So uh, it is inherent that a better character is going to have more tools, more options, more things to lab. but not all labbing characters are effective. So, like, you'll have, I'm not going to name anything because people get really defensive about the subject, but you can have like TAS level characters that aren't really doing anything. And then you're going to also have characters like Beo, for example, where they just have such a wide variety of things that they can do, ways that they can develop that are not necessarily going to be as redundant as, say, well, whichever Tetris character we're discussing at the time. So the idea is it's a matter of fragility and whether or not it's rewarded in like a linear fashion. Like, do you have to have this perfect in order to get the reward, or do you need to? Are you rewarded for trying to improve and then being rewarded as you continue improving on that? And so whenever there's that kind of linear improvement, I think that those are the labbing characters that tend to pay off more in practice than the others. And so that's just something I wanted to make a note of.
Very true.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I've said all there is to say. I think at the end of the day, it's all about, like Bam said, you got to find like-minded people. You cannot force a cooperation on anyone.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for me, one just like final thing to note, back in the day, it was a lot easier to lab out matchups and have matchup specific tech because there wasn't that much matchups because there were only a handful of good characters in the previous iteration of Smash. But in Ultimate, it can be very overwhelming because there's so many like categorized characters and then there's just a lot of viable characters that you're going to run into pretty deep in the bracket. So another reason why this information is so hard to archive is because there's like so much like more relevant matchups in the balance of the game, right? So it can be hard, but yeah. I guess
close us out, Charles.
Usually don't make bad characters, but yeah.
Any last thoughts, man? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I was just saying, like, modern games seldom make bad characters.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
just how it is nowadays.
Well,
a lot more viable
For
characters.
better or for worse.
If you guys
Better and for worse, that's for sure.
Absolutely. If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you guys have any ideas for any future topics for Coach's Corner, go ahead and leave it in the comment. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to rate the podcast as well. That helps us a ton. And until next time, class dismissed.